Hi there, this is David and welcome to the Top 10 Worst Sequences in JRPGs Part 3. You know whenever you're playing a game that you just love, but then you hit that part? Sometimes there are just entire sequences that you dread. Those areas in classic games that you know that you have to go through that you just can't stand. But you have to grin and bear it in order to get to the good stuff. We're not just talking about like one dungeon here, but entire sequences that can take hours to get through. So let's go ahead and get started. Number 10. The Introductory Grind of Final Fantasy Tactics. Don't get me wrong, Final Fantasy Tactics is one of my favorite games of all time, and I love coming up with all sorts of new and different challenges to give myself based around the job system. But what keeps me from coming back to it time and again is that horrible grind that you have to do on Mandalia Plains at the very beginning of the game. Y'all know what I'm talking about here. Don't pretend like you don't. Dorter Trade City is a hot mess difficulty spike, so you're going to need to be prepared for it. And you're also going to want to gain JP up from the Squire class as well. So you have to sit in Mandalia Plains for a year and a day, bopping your own characters upside the head, or using abilities like Focus until you just can't stand it any longer. Number 9. The Dark Cave of Shining Force 2. Oh my god, what were they thinking? Strategy RPGs are just that. They require strategy, planning ahead, thinking and creating a method of attack in order to succeed. Now, most of the time you're put at some sort of disadvantage against the enemies. However, it's nothing that you can't overcome with a sound strategy. But then there's this bullshit where all you get is some little radiant light around your characters and you can't see where you're going or where the enemies are or where anything else is, so you're just constantly being attacked from the dark, and instead of being fun, it quickly just becomes a stress-inducing nightmare. Number 8. The Gummi Ship sequences in Kingdom Hearts. Whose bright idea was it to put pointless travel and Star Fox shooting mechanics into an action RPG? You're not playing the game for that. You're playing to explore, kick ass, and interact with Disney and Final Fantasy characters, not fly around in this stupid rocket ship between every single world just to get where you're going. I mean, I'm not the biggest fan of point-and-click world maps, but please just give me one here rather than this stupid shit. It actually reminds me of a lot of the Guardian Legend for the NES, but there it was well done. How in the world did they get this right back on the NES, but then they failed so miserably on the PS2? Number 7. The introduction of Wild Arms 3. I've said it before, and I'll say it again. Wild Arms 3 is boring, and it's way too long for its own good. However, it's especially egregious at the very beginning of the game. Not only do you have to go through all 4 of your hero's scenario sequences, but then, once they all meet together, you still don't really have any abilities. So you're sent off to fight the Guardians, and not just one, all 4 of them. It all just feels like a giant, long, pointless slog. And far be it from me to say to cut out some content, but in this case, I do think that it would have been much better to just begin the game with your party of drifters together, along with their respective magical mediums, instead of having to go through 5 hours of bullshit just to really get started playing this game. Number 6. The Magic Grind in Secret of Mana. Similar to the grind in Final Fantasy Tactics, the grind in Secret of Mana can be a bit obscene. However, whereas the majority of the grind in Tactics is relegated to the beginning of the game, Secret of Mana makes you grind constantly, especially for your magical spells. It's not so terrible for the first few spirits that you get, but for the final ones it can be just ridiculous. You get Dryad at like the very end of the game, and then they expect you to level her up all the way up to 8? Who has time for that? Especially since you really only have like 2 hours of playtime left. I mean, I guess it's not mandatory, but it certainly does feel like it is at times. Number 5. Infinity of Breath of Fire 2. I've talked about Breath of Fire 2 before, especially the Semaphore and High Fort sequences. They're just the worst. But who can forget Infinity, the most aptly named final dungeon in the history of gaming, because it just goes on forever. The encounter rate is out of this world, and it's a huge maze. But what really makes it like the worst thing ever is that there's a missable key situation where you have to go and talk to all of your party members in order to get the Infinity Dragon summon. And if you do miss it, oh well, you're screwed because you cannot defeat the final boss without it. You have to crawl all the way back over Infinity again, looking for that little tiny room, then go back and refight Death Evan. The whole thing just sucks. Number 4. The 4 Fields in Star Ocean 2. Normally when we get an airship in an RPG, it's a cause for celebration. It allows you to explore the entirety of the world, go around and do optional side quests, and really just take your time exploring all that there is to offer. Not so here though. Star Ocean 2 took this traditionally fun experience and made it something to dread, because you're immediately tasked with having to complete the 4 dungeon fields back to back to back. And they're all so long and so boring and such a slog because they're ridiculously hard and there's just no storyline and no reward either. I mean, honestly, at this point you're like 40 hours into the game, they just need to wrap it up already, not send you on some endless dungeon crawl. Number 3. The mini dungeons of Final Fantasy III. Final Fantasy III did a lot of things right, especially for an NES game. The job system, world building, and storytelling were top-notch, and you can really see the evolution of the franchise as it was going to be transitioning to the SNES just 1 year later. All that being said though, there are a few missteps that they did take, which are thankfully never repeated in future games. But it's most notably those mini dungeons where you literally have to go through the entire dungeon under the mini status. It's painful, especially since you can only damage monsters using magic, and Lord help you if you get hit because it pretty much just means instant death. What were they thinking? Number 2. Finding General White in Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. Is there anything worse than a never-ending wild goose chase? Towards the end of the game, you're tasked with finding General White, and then you literally have to backtrack through every single area in the game in order to find some random character who will then give you yet another hint, so you have to bumble around into that. It's infuriating as you're sent all over God's green earth looking for this stupid bastard. I mean, come on! Nintendo, you can do better than this. It's just so completely pointless. I don't understand what developer thought that this would actually be fun, because personally, I find this to be complete time waste and a slap in the face, because they just don't respect your time. And number 1, the solo sections of Sailor Moon: Another Story. Why is this number 1, you ask? Well, it's because I've actually powered through all of the other sections, and I've completed those past 9 games. But this one actually made me quit. I remember when the translation patch first came out, I was so excited to play a Sailor Moon RPG, so I started this bad boy up, got all my inner scouts together, and I was having an absolute blast. Until they all split up, and then you have to play through the chapters completely alone, and this is combined with an insanely high difficulty spike. It was literally impossible for me to do any sort of grinding because I was thrust into an area with no healing, no shops, and horrible encounters. Even like trash mobs would destroy me. And poor Sailor Mercury would never stand a chance. Well, that's it for the top 10 worst sequences in classic JRPGs Part 3. If you missed the first 2 parts, they can be found in the video description. What are your worst sequences in your favorite games? Do you agree or disagree? Let me know in the comments. And if you like this video and what I do here on the channel, please consider supporting me on Patreon for exclusive videos and early access to my new top 10s. The link to it can be found in the video description. This has been David. If you like this, please like, comment, and subscribe, and have a good day.